Hey guys, it's Casera, and today I'm going to be doing my November wrap-up. In the month of November, I read 16 books. That's if you're counting rereads, because I did a lot of rereading in November, even though I hadn't planned to do that until December. If you're not counting rereads, then I only read 8. So it wasn't a great month because I only read 8 of the books that were on my TBR, and it was a pretty long November TBR, but I still am happy with November. Like, I'm happy with the books that I read, so I'm not gonna sweat it too much. So if we go by category, then I read 7 fantasy books, 2 sci-fi books, and 7 classics. Which, I mean, that's the Anna Green Gables series. If you saw my week 1 reading vlog, I just out of nowhere decided to reread that series. So yeah, 7 books in that series I reread. So yeah, there's a lot of them. Then we go by star rating. My average star rating for the month was 4.4 stars. Aside from the rereads, nearly all of the books that I read this month was over 4 stars. So like, I'm really happy with that. I had a total of 4 5-star books, 5 4.5-star books, 4 4-star books, 3 3.5-star books, and 1 3-star book. So like, having no 2.5, 2-star books, like that's where I like to be. So I'm really happy with the star ratings that I had this month. So as for age ratings, I read 3 adult books, 6 YA books, and 7 children's books. Again, I'm counting the Anne of Green Gables series as children's books because that's how they felt to me as I was reading them, and I read them for the first time as a child, so like, it makes sense to me. Then we're gonna look at page count. I'll put a little thing up on the screen here so you guys can look at the page count, but the average page count was 394 pages, which is actually pretty low for me. Usually it's over 400 pages, so I read a lot of shorter books this month as well as a lot fewer books overall. And then for median, I read 10 physical books and 6 audiobooks, which is probably the best ratio I've had all year because I'm trying to get more physical books than audiobooks. I think part of the reason why is because I read a lot of longer audiobooks, and like, for example, I started The Count of Monte Cristo. It's a 52-hour audiobook, and I read 40 hours in it. So there's still 12 hours left. It doesn't even count towards my month because I didn't finish it yet, but I still read 40 hours of the audiobook in the month of November. So that's why my audiobooks are really down this month as opposed to previous months. But I'm pretty happy with 10 physical books. Like, that's really good. So now we're gonna move on to my reading goals. As you guys know, I have a goal to read 1 classic, 1 sci-fi, 1 historical fiction, 1 mystery or thriller novel, and 1 book over 700 pages every month. For my classic this month, I've already mentioned, I read Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. For my sci-fi this month, I read Starsight by Brent and Sanderson. Unfortunately, I did not read any historical fiction or thrillers or mystery novels, but I did read 1 book over 700 pages, which was The Burning White by Brent Weeks. So I obviously didn't do very well on my goals, which with the last month of the year that I'm planning on doing these goals is not great, but I did really well for the first 10 months, so like, it's okay. So next we could talk about my wrapped book challenge. So my wrapped books are books that I'm very close to unhauling, but I wanted to give it one last chance before I unhauled these books. So I wrap up all these books that I think I want to unhaul, but I want to give one last chance for before I do that, and every week I unwrap one of those books. This month I didn't do so great at the unwrapping part. I only ended up unwrapping 2 books. These are the 2 books that I unwrapped in the month of November. In the first week, I unwrapped Walk on Earth, a Stranger by Carson. I did not end up reading this book. I didn't even end up opening this book. Yes, I'm doing terrible on all of my goals and challenges this month. I know, it's fine. But I gave you guys a poll in my reading vlog as to what I should do with this book, and you guys decided that I'm going to use a save to keep this book. So I'll be keeping this book and I'll be rewrapping it so that I can unwrap it at some other time when I'm not in a massive reading slump. And then in the second week of November, I unwrapped Fairest by Gail, Carson, Levine. I also did not read this in the second week of November, and then I went on vacation in the 3rd week of November, so I read this in the 4th week. Yay! I actually did finish reading this book. I did enjoy it. This is from the same author who wrote L.A. Enchanted, and this is set in the same world of L.A. Enchanted, but it's in a different kingdom, and it's about a character who is a really, really good singer, and she was an orphan. She was left at an inn, and she was raised by an innkeeper, but she gets a chance to go to the king's wedding, and she goes there and like a lot of things happen and it's really good. There was a lot of thematic sort of themes, especially when it comes to beauty. Obviously it's called Fairest, there's a reason. It's a Snow White retelling, and she is known not for her beauty but for her voice and how beautiful her voice is, which I think was a really interesting spin on the retelling. Personally though, I had a few issues with the maturity of like the conflict here, but I did still really enjoy it. I ended up giving it 3.75 stars. So now it's time to talk about the rereads that I did this month. The first rereads that I did this month is the Anne of Green Gables series by Ellen Montgomery, which includes Anne of Green Gables, Anne of Avonlea, Anne of the Island, Anne of Windy Poplars, Anne's House of Dreams, Anne of Ingleside, and Rainbow Valley. So this is obviously a classic series. A lot of people love the series. For those of you who don't know, it's following a character named Anne Shirley, who is an orphan, and she's taken in by Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert. They originally sent out for a boy. She ended up being a girl, but she kind of convinces them to keep her, and she has just this very imaginative nature, and she does things in the weirdest way possible, and she's just an interesting character to read about, and I love her because of that. These are very much children's novels because it always finds a way to follow the children. So in the first book, obviously it's following Anne as she's young, and it follows like 4 years of her life as she's younger and just growing up a little bit. And then in the later books, it starts to follow some of the other characters. Like for example, in Anne of Avonlea, there are 2 twins that are also taken in by the Cuthberts. So it kind of starts to follow Davy and his sister a little bit. And when you really get to see it stray away from Anne would be in Anne of Ingleside up there, because it starts to follow her kids more, which is when I start to stop paying attention to the series as much, which is why I didn't end up finishing the series, because there's 8 books in the series and I only read 7 of them. I gave most of these books between 3.5 to 4.75 stars. So the one that I rated the highest is Anne of the Island. This is my favorite book in the series just because of the romance that happens in this one. Like the romance is built up through Anne of Green Gables and Anne of Avonlea, but it really culminates really well in Anne of the Island. And that's why it's my favorite book, just because it's done in a very almost Pride and Prejudice sort of way, if you know what I mean. And I really enjoyed that. The rest of the books, I enjoyed them, but they weren't like tear my heart out good, if you know what I mean. So overall, I enjoyed them. I enjoyed my reread of them. I enjoyed probably more watching the new Netflix series Anne with an E, which is the reason why I picked up these books in the first place to reread, which was really, really good, by the way. I highly recommend it. It does follow the books quite a bit. Like there's a lot of the same lines there, but then there's a lot of plot lines that are definitely not in the books. But yes, I enjoyed both of them and definitely recommend them. If you want to read some classic children's books, I definitely recommend them. And the other rereads that I did this month is The Cruel Prince and the Wicked King by Holly Black. I reread these in anticipation of The Queen of Nothing, which came out in November, obviously. I had a very different perspective on these having reread them. For The Cruel Prince, I didn't expect to like it as much as I did the second time around. Like, there's a lot of intricate things that happen in The Cruel Prince that are so different. Knowing what I do now, starting over the book, it's such a different book, I think, rereading it, and I really enjoyed that. I actually didn't enjoy The Wicked King as much as I did the first time around because it made me just really sad at the end. Like, if you watch my book talks on these, I was just really sad at the end of The Wicked King, but I still really love this series. For those of you guys who don't know, this series is following a character named Jude, who is a human that lives in the fairy world, where she's basically a second-class citizen, but because she is like the sort of daughter of the general of the kingdom, he kind of makes sure that they get the upbringing that any regular fairy would, and the characters are just amazing. I love them, and I love all of the tension in the series. Like, this series has some of the best tension, and I love it. If you want to know more about the series, I did book talks for all 3 books in the series, so I will link that up in the cards if you guys want to check that out. By the way, I also gave both of these books 5 stars. I don't have any DNFs this month, so we're going to move on to all of the other books that I read for the first time in November. As always, I will start with my lowest rated book and work my way up to my highest rated book. The first book I want to talk about is Time of Contempt by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is the second novel in the Witcher series. There are 2 sets of short stories, and then there's the first novel, Blood of Elves, and this is the second novel. This series has been a little odd for me because this is a really beloved series on BookTube. Like, tons of people who love adult fantasy love this series, and I like it. I don't love it yet. I'm still waiting to get to that point where I love it. But as of right now, I like it. I'm 4 books into the series and I only like it now. So I feel like I'm missing something, but I do really like the way the writing style is done. I enjoy all of the descriptions and things like that. I do like these main characters. It just hasn't really clicked in my head yet what's so good about this series. I still really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.25 stars. I enjoyed it a lot more than the first book in the series, Blood of Owls. Like, there was just something about this book that I liked more than it, but I'm still waiting to figure out what people love it so much. If you've read the series, let me know down in the comments, because I honestly don't understand why it's so beloved. Like, I think it's a good series, but I don't think it should be as hyped as it is. I don't know. Maybe the last 3 books are just really, really good, and I don't know what I'm talking about, maybe. But anyways, I gave this one 4.25 stars, and I'm definitely excited to continue on with this series as well. The next book that I'd like to talk about is The Starless Tea by Erin Morgenstern. So this book also came out in November, and for those of you guys don't know, Erin Morgenstern is the same author who wrote The Night Circus, which I absolutely love. I did do a whole review on this one, so I will link that up in the cards if you guys want to check that out. This is definitely one of those kinds of books that you can't really connect necessarily to the characters or to the plot too much of the book, but it's the atmosphere of the book and the world building that makes this book amazing, and I did really love it. It's kind of a little mind-bendy, but at the same time there is like a concrete aspect to it as well. There are a lot of different like sections to this book, because there is this character who is reading this book, and then there are stories from the book, and I loved all of the different stories. The stories were magnificent. I absolutely loved reading every single one of them, and I did love following the character as well as he was going through everything. Zachary Ezra Rawlings is the main character, and he's a grad student that finds in the library this book that is like not attached to anything, and when he's reading the book, he finds this scene from when he was a child. Like, it's a memory from when he was a child that he remembers very well. So he's kind of investigating that and why his memory from childhood would be in a book. So it's definitely very interesting. I think if you really like atmospheric fantasy and interesting writing, you would really like this book. But if you're looking for a lot of plot and character building, this is probably not the book for you. I personally really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4.75 stars. The next book that I'd like to talk about is Starsight by Brent and Sanderson. This book is the sequel to Skyward, also by Brent and Sanderson, obviously. I recently finished this book and I absolutely loved it. So this is also following the character named Spencer, and she lives in a world which is basically being contained by these aliens, and it's just like a group of humans that are constantly at war, and she's one of the fighter pilots in their Air Force, basically, or Space Force. I'm not sure how you would call that, but she has a very special position. She has kind of like this special ability to like see into the stars. She calls it in the book seeing into nowhere, and it's just very interesting. I love her and her plot line. I'm thinking that there's gonna be another book in this series, because the ending really seemed to be setting up another book in the series, and I'm definitely excited for it, because I'm excited to see where it's going, because this book got a lot more political than the previous book did, and I love how political it got. I just loved all of the different like political points of views that Spencer has to basically see from, and all of that, and it's very well done, and I really enjoyed it. So I ended up giving this one 4.75 stars as well. So the next book that I want to talk about is The Burning White by Brent Weeks. This is the 5th book in the Lightbringer series, and it's the final book in the Lightbringer series, which I was really excited for, because the Lightbringer series I read for the first time this year. It's one of those series that I just get sucked into every time. It's a huge series. Like the Burning White was like 992 pages, I think. Like, it was crazy long, but it was so good. I really enjoyed it. I will say the front half of this book dragged quite a bit. It felt very much like it was still the last book, which is The Blood Mirror, but once it started getting into like more of the action that I was looking for, it was so good, and just some parts of it were just so heartbreaking, and I absolutely loved it, and I ended up giving that one 4.75 stars as well. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is The Toll by Neal Shusterman. So this is the 3rd book in the Arc of Scythe trilogy. You might be seeing a pattern here, because all of the books that I read in November are sequels. Like, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have read anything in November if it wasn't for all of these sequels coming out. But I did really enjoy The Toll. I probably enjoyed it more than any of the other books in this series. For those of you who don't know, The Toll is set in a world in which humanity has unlimited computing power, and their AI has basically been able to defeat death. So they don't have to die anymore, but because of population control, they have this group of people called Scythes who kill people for population control. And this book, over all the other books, got incredibly political, and I love that about it. There was a lot of politics involved. There were a lot of differing opinions, and there were a lot of decisions where there was no right decision. And I love it when books have that, because it really makes the characters think about what they're doing and if what they're doing is the right thing. And I really enjoyed that about this book. I feel like a lot of people didn't like that about this book because it felt to me a little bit more like an adult book than it did a YA book. While the first two books were definitely still 100% in the realm of YA, this one, while it still is a YA book, it felt like it was delving into more of the sort of things that I would find in the adult books that I read, and I really enjoyed that about this book. So even though a lot of you guys didn't really seem to enjoy it as much as you guys wanted to in the comments for my review that I did in this book, I still did really enjoy it, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. By the way, I did a full review in this book, so if you guys want to check that out, I will link that up in the cards for you guys. And last but not least, we have Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. I was so excited for this book. Like, you have no idea how excited I was to pick up this book in November. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, I reread The Cruel Prince and The Wicked King in anticipation of this book. I wanted to just remember all the little details going into The Queen of Nothing, and I'm really glad that I did, because there was a lot of things that I noticed about the characters and their relationships and just the world in general that I didn't really realize like the first time around. So I really enjoyed that. And in The Queen of Nothing, it starts on a really big cliffhanger because the end of The Wicked King has a huge cliffhanger. I like the way that it was resolved. Usually I have issues with the way cliffhangers are resolved, but I feel like it was done in a really good way in this book. I will say that The Queen of Nothing is probably my least favorite book in this series. It was still one of like my best reading experiences for the month, just because I was reading it for the first time, and it is amazing. Like, I still love Jude as a main character, who's the main character of this book, and I love everything that happens here, except for the epilogue. I really did not like the epilogue, but if you want to know more about that, then you can check out my review on this, which I will link up in the cards for you guys. I did give this one 5 stars as well. So that's all I have for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. In December, I'm planning on posting videos at least 4 times a week, so consider subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.